And we're live. Woo! I don't know. Something about being live on the internet. It's one of those crazy eras in life, when you can be live on the internet and nobody can stop you. So, well, welcome to another Eduro Learning YouTube live event here at our Eduro Learning YouTube channel. If you haven't gone back and looked at some of the other ones, please go back. There's some incredible videos that we've got posted here. Quick, short things to long hour things. So my name is Jeff Udick. Thank you for joining us tonight as we're live here on YouTube. We'll be here once a week, usually every Thursdays at some point in time, depending. I say Thursday night, but it depends where you are in the world, because we are usually record these Thursday nights, but it could be Thursday night Bangkok time or Thursday night Perth, Australia time, or Thursday night here in Seattle. So it's always something. So as always, if there's anything you'd like to hear from us, there is a chat room that you can chat to us live right now. If you're watching live or later on, please feel free to leave comments under the video as well. So we can always come back and we answer those comments and keep things going. So we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to leave us a comment somewhere on the web. It's always great and well appreciated. This week, we're going to be talking about ways to stay a lifelong learner, building upon last week's video by Kim Cafino, one of our partners at Eduro Learning. If you haven't watched that video is getting rave reviews. Kim really dives into why it's so important for us to be lifelong learning. And then Ken and I today are going to just build upon that by looking at some of the tools and some of the ways you can stay being a lifelong learner, and just some of the things that we do as a lifelong learner. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our guest today. Luckily, we're on the same time zone. That doesn't happen very often for us, but yeah, Ken is here in Seattle with me. So Ken Pendergrass, please take it away. Introduce ourselves to you.
Right. I'm Ken Pendergrass. I'm a teacher here in Seattle Public Schools. I've been teaching for almost 22 years. Right now, I'm currently teaching elementary school and loving it.
Loves the recorder, right? The recorder's your favorite instrument.
A hot cross buns is on my top list. Funny, because I was just telling Jeff I had an orchestra concert last night, and it really doesn't matter what instruments. Hot cross buns is like in the top 5 of beginning instrumental songs. But I do teach general music, instrumental, and choir. I'm really fortunate at the school that I'm at to do all of those things, which is really fun.
Yeah.
I'm also a content demonstration teacher for the visual and performing arts, and that means that, and actually this is the first year we've had a general music teacher, which is really cool. Teachers who want to see what's going on or are new to teaching can come into my classroom, which I see is a mess behind me, but
it's perfect. It's perfect backdrop for a teacher. Really, it is.
And they come in. It's really more collaborative. They watch a lesson, me do a lesson, we download before, and
that's cool.
It's actually really great, because a lot of times when you're a specialist in a building,
you're
just kind of hoping you can talk to somebody who speaks your language, right?
Yeah.
So
you're like the only one, right? Like you're literally like the only music teacher at your school.
Right. So it's really nice when you have other colleagues to bounce ideas off. And,
yeah. And are you Microsoft certified educator or something like that?
I am. I just recently became Microsoft certified, which we can talk about. And also I'm level 1 Google certified. So
yeah,
we're firmly in the Microsoft orbit here in Seattle Public Schools. But I think, once you kind of have the fundies for all of those platforms, you can pick and choose what works best.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the reason why I love, I'm hoping, because we're on the same time zones, we can do more of these together. I love having somebody else to talk with when we do these YouTube videos. But I think, with what we're talking about today, with this idea of being a lifelong learner, I think, with the things that you've gone through to become Microsoft certified and Google certified, like those are ways that we stay current, not only in your music field, but just also what's out there and what's going on. And hopefully as we go through this, I hope that we get to talk a little bit about what you're doing in the music classroom with your blog, and maybe we can do about that now, because I think that's a big part of it. I think we don't always think of like technology affecting music education, especially in the elementary classroom. And I think you're doing some really cool things with SoundCloud and recordings. And talk to us a little bit about some of the stuff that you're producing and how technology is playing into that.
Sure. Well, years ago, I used to do a blog like you when I ran into you on the Thinking Stick.
Yeah.
That was really more about being a philosophy of music education. We got together. There was Joe Pisano, who's at Central College, Central Grove College. I'm getting that wrong, but he's back east. He said, I need 12 music ed bloggers. And I started that in 2004 or maybe 2007. I can't remember. But in my classroom, just doing music things, it's a digital portfolio. It's just sort of a natural place to share students' work. And at the time, I was familiar with Blogger and some other ways, but I thought, my classroom is 500 kids,
Yeah.
I see every single student. So I thought I need a way to communicate with parents, whether I'm talking about concerts, whether I'm talking about what's happening in the classroom. And WordPress worked great for me. So I have a WordPress blog. I bought my own domain, totally, mrpendergrass.com. Check it out. And basically, what I do is use my posts as announcements. But in addition to that, I will do recordings of classes. So who doesn't love to hear kindergartners sing, right? So
Yeah.
I'll record that in GarageBand. I have a Mac in my room. I use the share function in GarageBand, which is awesome. You type in your credentials once for SoundCloud.
Yeah.
Puts it in SoundCloud, gives you the embed code, and I run it up to WordPress. And the teachers email their parents, listen to your kids, and then grandma who might live, halfway across the country can check it out. And that to me has been a really wonderful way to showcase student work, from singing to my kids just recently, my 5th grade kids did these Gold Rush advertisements. And it was funny because I told them, we're going to do radio spots. And I realized nobody listens to the radio. So they looked at me funny and I go, okay, what I mean is like a Pandora ad. And they all shook their head. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
I said, when your parents are too cheap to pay for the full version, and you have that.
The ad you have to watch before you can watch the YouTube video.
And I really had to say that because suffice it to say, they created some audio ads. I said, you can't use any pictures. And we tied it into this unit we were doing on the Gold Rush, the California Gold Rush.
Very cool.
And if you go to my blog, they're there. And some of them are so funny. And because they knew it was going to be on the mrpendergrass.com, they really put some thought into these things.
Yeah. Do you find that it's something that we constantly talk about with students, is this idea that when they know it's going to be out there, right? Like even you can say, this is going to go on mrpendergrass.com.
Yeah.
There's going to be some really good stuff. Do you find the level of engagement and the quality of what they make rise?
It's really true. I've been teaching instrumental music for a long time, and it's like, I'm playing for my parents, they're going to clap no matter what. But when we sort of said, hey, we need to put something out there that anybody can listen to. Yeah. Sit a little taller, we're going to take it a little more serious. When I was teaching middle school, we were doing this thing with Indaba Music, which was one of the early sort of online, before SoundCloud. You'd put your stuff up there, and they had this great contest where Yo-Yo Ma puts out a little sound clip of him playing, and he says, we want you to remix our stuff and put it up here. So I was teaching 7th grade at the time. They didn't know who Yo-Yo Ma was, and I was completely freaking out about the greatest cellist in the world. And they're like, but it's going to be online, right? I said, yeah. And one of our kids, and it was a really great community, it was professional musicians, and I would send them little side chats. I said, hey, if you can encourage my kids, and they wouldn't even do it sort of gratuitously. They were like, your kids are great. And one of our kids got into the top 10 because it was basically on voting, and of course I leveraged the staff to,
of course, yes, of course,
get to the ballot box. But when they knew, they took it seriously and that was probably 2007. before like YouTube viral things were taking off, like YouTube stars were a thing.
Yeah.
But I said, what if somebody listened to your work who was a professional musician and said, hey, I want to talk to you about collaborating. And then that became so much more real to them than just like a stupid project that we're going to do in the music classroom. So yeah, you're exactly right. The engagement just goes out the roof.
I love it. I love it. Doing some great stuff. And I just, I always love talking to you about some of the stuff that you're always got going over there in your music classroom. So, all right, well, let's jump into some of the ways that we stayed lifelong learners. And I think at the top of the list over the last couple of days, we've kind of been putting together a list here to kind of share with people of ways that we learned. And I think as we were kind of making this list, I think number one right now has got to be YouTube. I mean, I was just on YouTube, I don't know, 5 times today. Like my blog went down and I couldn't figure it out. And, I think my favorite, is just understanding. I mean, one thing that I love about YouTube is anybody can post stuff there, and you can find such a range of stuff by a range of different people. I was watching a video today on something I was trying to do, and I could just tell like the voice was like this, I'm guessing like 6th or 7th grade girl. And you could even hear like she wasn't even, what was it? It was, I'm writing a paper on gamification in the classroom, and she was walking you through like one of the gamification platforms, and you could tell it was done like during class because you can hear like class noise behind her. She's walking. I'm just like, man,
and it's got like thousands of views, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm just like, how incredible, how incredible is this?
I mean, years ago, I would be sort of geeking out on my Android phones, and I'd look up reviews. Yeah. It was always a white male dude.
Yeah.
You do it now, and you have all kinds of kids.
Yeah.
All kinds of races.
Yeah.
And they're way younger than me, way smarter. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm watching that YouTube video because it's got so many hits, and they're super articulate. They know about the tech, and you're like, I'm going to buy that phone based on some 12-year-old's recommendation, and because it's their thing and they can share it out. I think especially for music and like guitar or any kind of instrument instruction, it is just exponentially for me in the classroom. We have a custodian here. He's talking to me. I said, I need to get you a guitar, Eugene. He goes, oh, that would be awesome. So I talked to the staff, gave him a guitar, and I'm thinking, I'm going to impart my wisdom to Eugene. He comes back, he goes, well, I can play all these songs now. I go, where do you get your lessons? YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm like,
incredible platform.
Perfect.
Yeah. I love it. It's just a great place. And I think at the top of the list, just if you're going to be a lifelong learner, dig in and try to stay focused on stuff that is learning focused. Don't watch the cat videos, which is the hardest part of YouTube. Try to stay off the cat videos, but it is. Number 2 on our list, we did podcasts. And I think, podcasts have made a comeback here. And I would say probably the last 2 years, all of a sudden, we were podcasting, in like 2007 through 2009, I went back, I've done over 100 podcasts on different podcast channels. We at Edura Learning have restarted one of those podcasts called Shifting Our Schools. Comes out every Wednesday. You can find it anywhere. But, all of a sudden I'm back to, I don't hardly listen to the radio anymore. My wife and I just went for a run here before it started raining, and we both were listening to different podcasts, on different topics. And there's just so much great stuff out there. If, an audio form that you can listen in the car or while you're working out or running, or I just think, it's a whole, it's come back, it kind of lost its way there for a while, but I feel like it's really coming back. And there's so many great podcasts, especially educational, around anything you want to do. It's really, really great.
So much easier. I think you're right. Podcasting was this really great idea, like 2004, 2007. My son tried to do a RuneScape podcast when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And I still save that audio when I want to sort of blackmail him for a little preteen voice, but it was really difficult to sort of disseminate it. It was more like this pretty much iTunes specific, but you and I talked about this. I'm a big Google guy, and Google Music, even just, I think in the last, 14 months, they didn't really have sort of like a dedicated podcast place.
Yeah.
You just go, boom, Shifting Our Schools, subscribe.
Yeah. And when we started doing Shifting Our Schools, I didn't know that Spotify had podcasts.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, I'm like starting to put Shifting Our Schools together and saying, okay, I need to get it in the Apple Store and the Google Store. And all of a sudden it's like, well, Spotify has podcasts. I'm like, I had no idea, I mean, I think everybody's kind of picking up on them, which is great. And the other thing, to your point, I think one of the reasons why they're coming back now is when we were doing it, like, I didn't even think about this, but when we started doing Shifting Our Schools in 2008, 2009, like the iPhone had just come out. So you had to have another device.
Yes.
Right? Like you didn't listen to them on the flip phone. So you had to have the iPod, or I remember I had a little MP3 player. And so you had to download it, and it was all these extra steps.
I have this MP3 player with an SD card, but I got to put it on my computer to get it downloaded.
Yeah.
And it's 20 steps later. You're like, I got the podcast. It's
exactly. And I think just, having the smartphone and, with data rates being what they are, it's so easy to just, like, on my phone, I just say, download the latest 3 episodes. Yes, please. And it just, it doesn't take it long. It's not a lot of data. Most of our podcasts are, I'm guessing, are around like 30 megabytes, which in today's standards is nothing.
Right.
They're pretty small pieces, but there's so much learning to be done there. If you're not listening to podcasts, I would say that would be one of my things I would think about adding. And, it takes some time to find the podcast you like. My wife and I are listening to a couple different ones at this moment together. And I like listening to them because as I'm getting back into podcasting, just, what are people talking about? And there's a couple of them, we listen to them. We're like, I don't like the person. Like, I don't like the voice, or the audio quality is not good, or there's just something there. And we don't give up on podcasting, but, delete that podcast out of your system and find one that does work for you. And there's just, there's so many out there, so many great ones out there. You don't have to listen to the bad ones, whichever one's for you.
I'll put some in the show notes for some good music ed ones that have come out over the years. There's a great podcast of these young teachers. I think they're in Texas, and one teaches at the elementary school that feeds into the middle school, that feeds into the high school.
Yeah.
And I mean, your audience may be thinking, oh, super interesting, Ken. But for music people, when you're looking sort of guiding students through a whole thing, their conversations, I'm screaming at the speaker, and I'm like, oh, you're so right, because they're kind of struggling and they're kind of mad about it. And my kids do this, and but it's real insight into teaching, and especially if you're kind of a specialist.
Yeah,
you can find podcasts for really anything. And now with Alexa and all that integration, I can say, Alexa, play Shifting Our Schools podcast, and it doesn't go who.
Yeah, exactly. It just finds it. Yeah.
And that's whole Internet of Things is like,
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get Shifting Our Schools on Spotify and TuneIn, because they work with Alexas or with Google. And you can just, once you tie in your account, hook your account up to it, you just say the name of whatever podcast you want. And you're listening to it in your house while you're vacuuming. Well, maybe not when you're vacuuming, because
podcasts are great.
Doing the dishes, yeah. The other thing on here, and I think this is, maybe a little more specific to teachers, but I mean it is for everybody. But just Twitter hashtags, and you even added on here, Twitter lists. For easy management. I don't use lists so much. I'm more of a hashtag guy, where I'll follow, like, for example, we've got a couple of conferences coming up here in February. February's kind of conference season. And I've already started to follow the hashtag for those conferences. It's a great way to get to know people, see what's going on. And if you want to, find the hashtag. Like, if you can't go to a conference, and I'll just use ISTE as the big example in the ed tech world. If you can't go to ISTE this year because your school doesn't have the funds, or you don't have the funds, and you still want to learn, block out those days in your calendar. Find the ISTE hashtag. It's probably going to be hashtag ISTE18. That's usually every year what it is. And you can glean so much stuff by just following a specific hashtag. And in schools, is there a music ed one? Just hashtag music ed?
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
There's a ton of them. Yeah.
Music ed chat. It's funny because I'm jealous NCCE that you're going to. I'll be hashtagging that and then following along with you while I'm teaching. But I think, I've sort of had a love-hate relationship with Twitter until I sort of finally realized how to make it work for me. Excuse me. And one of the things, the way I kind of use lists, and I will use hashtags, is I'll make a music ed list, and I'll put the people I want to follow and just kind of read their tweets. Because at first it was kind of drinking out of a fire hydrant. I'm like, I got to follow all these people. And then I realized, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Or I'll turn on my notifications only for a few people, and then I'm on but I really want to see happen in the moment.
Yeah.
Or then I'll, but it takes a little figuring that out. But the funniest thing for Twitter and music for me, this is again back when I thought Twitter was just, I took a picture of my burger, hashtag food.
Yeah.
But there's a guy who wrote this book called This Is Your Brain on Music. His name's Daniel Levitin. He's out of McGill University. He's amazing. It's a really great book for anybody who's not even a musician. And PBS special is coming up about this book. And I was just kind of getting into Twitter. And I was following some music educators, and they said, hey, if you hashtag, I think it was his name or the thing, he's going to be talking to you during the show. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I'm watching it, and my wife's there, and I'm typing, and I typed in something. I was kind of being facetious, like, yeah, this is your brain on whatever. And he typed, the author, Levitin, the dude, types back, hey, Ken, thanks for joining us. And I'm pointing to the TV and pointing to my wife, that guy's talking to me on Twitter. It was like the first moment where I realized I had access to this person who's top of his game, wrote a cool book that I really respected. And then I got crazy. And then they finally, you were all typing, and he's like, we're going to take this to another forum. But through that, I realized, if I can follow Daniel Levitin or any other musician or professional person who tweets out, and usually that might just send you to their blog post or a really cool article. It's really worth it. I know a lot of people, I don't have time for Twitter. Nobody has time for anything. But if you can manage it, I think it can be really powerful. This is where I find new stuff. This is where I always blow you away. I'm like, hey, I found this thing, but I don't tell you on Twitter.
It's like, where the heck did you find it? Yeah, it's just incredible. And I think you make a really good point is people get overwhelmed by Twitter if you think of Twitter as the entire thing. And I think the thing that's interesting for me is when people, I say, well, when I'm meeting people and stuff, and I'll be like, well, you do understand that like Facebook is like 2 billion people, right? But you don't, in Facebook, you have your 80 friends, 150 friends. Like you get to decide who you want those signals from. You set up that same type of system, and it takes time. And to your point, right? It takes time to say, okay, I'm going to add this person to this list, or I just want to get notifications. There's some time management in growing that PLN on Twitter. I've used a couple lists. And I don't use them just for education. I'm a big Seattle Mariners fan. So I have a list of like the Seattle Mariners, and all the Seattle Mariners who have a Twitter account and all their wives who have Twitter account, because here's a little pro tip. If you want to follow any baseball players and want to really know what's going on behind the scenes, follow the wives, because they'll let you know what's going on in the lives. Like if you're really geeky, that's just a geeky, geeky moment. Yeah. But, I also have a list of just, all of the educators. I'm trying to put together a list of all the educators in the Pacific Northwest. So in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And I have a list of them just to see what's going on in my area. What are people talking about? And what are things that, are happening in this area? So you can do those lists that are either localized to your area, localized to a subject, like you're saying, go into the hashtag. And then once you're in the hashtag, say, ooh, that person always shares really good stuff. I'm going to add them to my list, and there's a hashtag, like there's 4th grade chat and 5th grade chat and physics chat. And, there's one for every subject, every grade level, but you have to spend that time managing it and getting it set up to get the reward out of it. And that where people usually where you get that, like, well, I don't have the time. Well, you're right. But if you spend a little bit of time now, it just comes, right? Like it just, once you set it up, it just kind of flows. So.
Here in West Seattle, we have the West Seattle blog, which is basically gossip columnist, police blotter, and anything that happens in this little area of West Seattle. And they'll put out traffic alerts way before SDOT does.
Wow, yeah.
And that's just sort of a more practical way to use it. But if I found an author who's if I'm at a PD and someone says, you got to read this book by this author, I immediately go look for them on Twitter.
Yeah.
Because usually they're probably blogging or they're sending even to higher ed, or they're doing some really in-depth articles maybe you're going to need for some kind of study down the road. And they usually tweet that stuff out because they're trying to promote their things too. And you get into this good, as you say, that PLN idea, the personal learning network, where you're not just, it's not everybody, because Twitter wants to recommend all the stuff to you based on and there are a lot of good clients. Twitter Twitter clients that are a little more pared down if Twitter just seems too crazy for you.
Yeah.
But
and we'll put links to those in the show notes. I like Hootsuite. I know that's what I use. What do you use?
I used Hootsuite for a while, and then on Android I used I forget what it's called, Talon maybe, or
Talon. Yeah,
there's just a little bit more.
Yeah,
I've used TweetDeck when I'm on my computer, so I love to do that.
And you can find the one that works for you. You know, I mean, they're all the one that allows you to see lists or see hashtags. You know, so you're not always going back and looking for those.
Right.
Yeah. I think the next one that is really the thing that I found interesting is this next tool is called Flipboard. And Flipboard for a while, and I'm not sure if it still is, but I know on a bunch of Samsung phones was being pre-installed. And so it really grew an audience quite quickly in being pre-installed on a bunch of phones. What I love about Flipboard, though, is it's kind of a curated list. I don't know how else to say it. It's kind of a curated article. It's a magazine.
Yeah.
Beautiful. What I love most about Flipboard is it's a beautiful reading experience. And it does now work on the web. When they first started, very interesting with Flipboard is it started out as a mobile app on, you know, it was designed for smartphones, and then they created the web version as well. But it's got some really great features of being able to save articles. Like I've got so many articles saved in there, and I'm just always like, okay, I know I read that article somewhere, and I can go back in and they're all saved right in the app. Just a beautiful reading experience. And then there's so much you can do with it in the classroom, which we're not going to get into now, but you know, really it's just you can add RSS feeds to it as well. So really, I use it as like an RSS reader where like I will take your blog, you know, mrpendergrass.com, and I can put it in there, and then it just pulls those RSS feeds. So I use it a lot like that as well.
It looks great on an iPad because it's got that kind of magazine layout, and it tends to take the images and put them forward, which is really catchy. Yeah.
It's just nice. It's just a nice reading experience for sure. A nice little community there. Yeah. And you can go in and you can actually search for the topics that you want to follow. So like I follow, you know, education, I follow technology, I follow, you know, what the Mariners, you know, and then it just, the nice thing is it combines all those, like when it creates your, it clips your Flipboard for you, it's combining your different interests together. So I'm not always reading education stuff. You know, it's which one thing I love about it, where I try to get teachers to go to, is like set up systems that aren't just about your work, but they also have to include your passion, because that'll make you go to them.
Right.
You know? So I go into Flipboard and I'm reading something about the Mariners, and right next to it is, you know, 5 ways to use Google Maps in the classroom. And I'm like, sweet, I'll read that real quick as well. And so being able to cross over those interests, I think is a big one as well. Pinterest.
Well, you know, I just put that there because for some reason, Pinterest is huge in the music world. That's because we all like to take pictures of our classroom bulletin boards and put them on Pinterest.
It's big in education for that, right?
It's huge. And I used to think it was just for quilting circles or something, you know? And don't throw things at me, but and I kind of put my account away, but I think it's similar to Flipboard in that it provides you stuff, promoted content, but at the same time, you can sort of make your own Pinterest boards. I don't use it as much as I should, but when anybody says, I need some inspiration for a bulletin board in my classroom, and usually that's, in my case, it has nothing that's definitely about artistic things. It's about teaching something, and I'll go and find the coolest way to portray a music concept that I just would have never thought of. And I think Pinterest seems for music and education, at least from a visual standpoint, if you're just like stuck, you know, you can go just kind of like, whoa, that's cool, and flip through stuff.
I have a friend who's a second grade teacher, and every time I walk into her classroom, I mean, her classroom is always so clean and so spotless, and she's got it so well organized. And I'll walk into her classroom, I'm like, oh, that is such a cool way to organize that. How did you come up with that? She's like, every answer is like Pinterest. And I'm just like, well, you would think I'd stop asking after a while, that I know that's where she goes for her stuff. One, I think in education that gets overlooked a lot, and I know that Kim and Chrissy are going to be rolling their eyes when they go back and listen to this, because I'm constantly going on about Google Plus. You know, people, Google Plus has gotten a bad rap, and people, you know, you always will read, you'll read articles about Google Plus like, oh, it's dying, it failed. And it depends, I guess, on how you consider failure. I mean, there are over 300 million active users. That's basically everybody in the United States using Google Plus. I don't call that a failure. If you're comparing it to the 2 billion people that use Facebook, sure, there's an economy of scale there. But I think, because so many school districts are going Google Apps and going Chromebooks, that there is a rich, I mean, really, really rich educational community in Google Plus. And what I have found about Google Plus is, much like we were saying with Twitter, where you might follow a hashtag or you create your list of people to follow, in Google Plus, it's all about the communities. Like, I don't follow people in Google Plus. I find my communities, and you can just do a search. Like, I do a search for educational technology, or I do a search for Genius Hour, or I do a search for inquiry-based learning, and I look for the communities that reach that topic. Man, it is so rich. It's so vibrant in there as well. It's just incredible. I love it.
I was a shameless Google fanboy for years, and when Google Plus came out, I'm just like, I'm going to make this work. And in the way that I think they wanted it to work, like Facebook, it didn't work. But since you've turned me back onto it with like GEG and some of these communities, it's really great, because it kind of went through its phase, and now I think people are really serious about doing really, particularly in the areas of education and probably anything. The posts are great. Reddit has its place. I think my sons who are in their 20s have turned me on to Reddit, but I'm too scared to go on Reddit. I'm too dumb to talk to those people, because they're kind of mean, Like,
Reddit can go bad real fast.
But I think with the Google Plus, if you get in the right community and you set up your notifications, which is how I found out about this YouTube Live, by the way, is a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great one. How about Audible books? Do you listen to a lot of Audible books? I mean, reading is always a great way. Let's not, like, there are some great books out there. And if you haven't bought your edition of Your Connected Classroom over on Amazon, that was written by Kim and Chrissy and I, you should go do that now.
Reviewed by me.
Reviewed by Ken. You should go do that now. I mean, books are good, but and maybe this is like, I don't know if I watch YouTube videos, I listen to podcasts, I listen to Audible books. I'm very much auditory in my learning. I always have been. But man,
you're traveling so much. I think you probably have
and I think that's it. For people that have a long commute time, Audible books are just incredible. I had to drive over to Spokane and back, about a 4.5 hour drive either way. And it's crazy, because I find myself excited now for drives. I'm like, ooh, I can get, this is an 8-hour book. I'm going to finish this book in this drive. And I just, put on the book. You don't have to worry about your radio station coming in and out. It's good quality system through the, through the car system, and just go, man. They're incredible. I love it as a way to learn. I'm gobbling up all kinds of stuff, from education to business to stories to fiction, nonfiction. I mean, there is something there, history stuff, something there for everybody. It's just it's a great way.
Yeah, I do those mostly when I travel, and if my commute were longer. My commute is so short. I don't even want to tell anybody I drive. But I do find those to be awesome ways to get into the meat of some stuff.
Some meat of stuff. So you put in here RSS feeds and Feedly, and I find that interesting, because when I feel like RSS feeds, they were really there. I mean, that's what podcasts are still built on an RSS feed. And they really are a foundation of the internet. If you're an internet geek, man, RSS really is the foundation of what it is today. But ever since Google Reader went away,
I know
I've just never. I mean, I use Flipboard that way. Like, if I find a good blog or something I want to follow, I throw that in my Flipboard. But I know a lot of people that use Feedly. You like Feedly? You like the way it's laid out?
I do. I'm with you. When Google Reader went away, I was in mourning for days. I'm like, this just works. And the cool features, I could set up groups to share when I was really following some stuff, and it was just easy to use. And so when I started looking around, Feedly was recommended. I think in its early days, I struggled with it, but just the idea of having content come to you rather than going out to get it is what turned me on to RSS feeds in the early days.
Yeah, for sure.
Keep track of a lot of blogs. And I liked the way that it would you know, a lot of blogs have all these menus and widgets, and I was like, I get to the meat of the thing, and it would just send.
And the thing is, it's incredible how many other, like, podcasting was built on the RSS feed, and still is. Like, if you want to put a podcast in iTunes, you give them an RSS feed to a blog. Like, your audio files got to be stored somewhere. But even like if you think of Facebook is really built on top of RSS. I post something on my wall, and when you and I when we have that friend connection, you basically are grabbing my RSS feed, and my stuff shows up in your wall. I mean, you start looking at how many of the social networks are really built on, and they don't use RSS now, of course, but you know, it's built on that same foundation of, I just want one place to go, and I want the internet to come to me instead of me going to the internet. And to me, that is the big switch. I mean, and as you hear us talk about all these different tools, to me, that is the big switch, is how do you, if we're talking about being a lifelong learner today, where, you know, you feel like you're drinking from the fire hose of information,
right?
How do you flip the internet on its head and you start to have the good stuff find you instead of you finding the good stuff?
That's exactly right.
That takes some time. Like we've been talking, I mean, it takes some time to set these systems up, but once you have them set up, it's incredible. Like, even like you were saying, the amount of stuff that every time we talk, you're like, oh, have you heard this? Have you that? And I'm like, no, but your system is different than my system. Right. And so we're getting this, you know, it's so powerful when we talk about the idea of lifelong learning. If you can get to a point where you don't feel like I'm constantly out there looking for stuff, you know, I get asked all the time, how do you know all of this stuff? You must just spend your entire time searching the internet. Do you ever get that? You must get that.
Well,
yeah. And it's like, how do you flip it? Right.
And I love being in that position, but you know, don't look behind the curtain. You know, it's like, I think about my dad. He subscribed to our local newspaper. He subscribed to the New York Times. He had a couple magazines. And when he'd come home from work, he had this big stack of stuff. He'd watch the evening news and he would unwind local news first. Got to get local news.
Yeah.
How are the Cowboys doing? That was my high school. They stink, of course, whatever. Go through the whole thing. My thing, when I come home, I sit down, I open Feedly, and I just scroll through stuff.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, oh, I find something. And most readers have something like this. I long press it and read later.
Yeah.
Or I dig down. And it's like what my dad did. That's how, and I learned that from him. He still is a lifelong learner. He's not as much into tech as I am, and I got to help him out these days. But it's the same idea. You know, but it just comes at us at such a tremendous force. You've got to kind of pick one or two things. And then from there, as you know, for me, I just love Feedly because I can scroll through.
Yeah, it's fast.
And get through it. And then I can dig down if I need to. Yeah. And that's what you do when you scan a newspaper in the old days, or even pick up a book, or you go to a magazine.
Yeah. I think that's a great analogy, because you're right. I mean, people are like, well, I don't have time to read everything. You don't read everything. You don't read I don't know anybody that reads the newspaper front to back. Like you're saying, you go to this section, you scan it, you grab the headline that looks good for you because if it happens to be something you're interested in or whatever, and the rest of the stuff goes by the wayside. You know, and you have to kind of treat, once you get your system set up, you know, and you keep tweaking the system. Like I'm constantly like adding this one, deleting that one, adding this one, deleting that one. Okay, I'll add that one back in for a while, or this person stopped. Yeah. You know, this person stopped blogging, so I'll take them out and I'll add a new one in. And, you know, it's a constant adjustment, but man, it's so powerful. So,
and I think, you know, just this maybe for another time, but it's funny because if it wasn't printed in the New York Times, it probably, or Washington Post or whatever, pick a great newspaper of past eras, probably still great, probably maybe not so reliable. Yeah. And I know Eduro has a lot of great resources for this about fake news, but it's funny because my parents now, who are using iPhones and iPads and stuff, you know, I have to tell them, just because it came through the device, it's not magic, or it's not definitive. Yeah. And it's funny because they would know that if I had, you know, the Globe or some racy magazine that's just be in the supermarket aisles, and I'd say, oh, this is an important story. No, this is not important. But it's funny, I think, for a different generation, if it comes through the device, it must be true. I read it on Facebook. Sure. It's like, you still got to vet.
Yeah, still got to vet. You got to vet everything. Yeah. The next one on our list is webinars. And, you know, here at Eduro Learning, we run webinars. There'll be a webinar here in a couple of weeks. Make sure you are subscribed to our newsletter. You can do that over at edurolearning.com. But webinars, especially what I love about webinars are twofold. One, I love being engaged in that synchronous moment.
Yep.
Like you were saying when you were watching the PBS, and all of a sudden you're in it with others, who are there for the same reason. And many of the tools we've talked about so far are asynchronous in that, I can come and go whenever I please in my 10 minutes. But I love when I find a good webinar. It's so great to be in that moment with other people, going through that experience with other people. And there are so many great webinars, and most of them, like the ones we run at Eduro Learning, are free. They're very easy to just get into. You sign up for them, you get a link, and, give yourself a half hour to be a learner. Give yourself an hour to do your learning that day. And you get to be in there with incredible other people, who are interested and passionate about that same topic that you are in that moment.
And I think companies have realized, so for example, I use this program, Noteflight, which is a great online music education program, music notation program. They recently were doing some Google Classroom integration, go to our webinar. And I was so glad, because I thought, how are they going to do that? Yeah. I'm a pretty techie guy, but I still want somebody to walk me through and watch it on the screen. That's another thing I love about webinars. When a company rolls out a new thing, they realize these are really great ways, and you can always go back and check them too. Usually they're stored.
Usually recorded. Yeah, good ones are usually recorded. Yeah,
exactly. But if you're there, I like to watch somebody go, oh, okay, there's where you click the mouse and do this. Oh, I see. And then I can kind of in the back channel type in, what did you mean by that? And then we'll get to that. That's a super cool way, especially when a new thing rolls out.
I totally agree.
Everybody has some kind of webinar / tutorial when they roll out a new thing, because they know things are changing, so we're going to push out something, and we're not going to leave you hanging. So
yeah, and I mean that's the reason why I love it. I love to engage with the audience, and this is great. Like we're doing a YouTube live, and we'll turn this into a podcast, but there's no interaction with the audience in the moment. Like somebody writes us a review later or a question later, we can do that. But there's something about in that moment, synchronous human connection, right? Human to human connection. And if we could all be in a room together, that would be great. But traffic is bad in Seattle. You're in West Seattle. I'm on Queen Anne.
Yeah, that's right.
This is second best, right? And then I would say asynchronous, goes down from there. Yeah. So, webinars, if you can find a good one on the web, give yourself some time. I always like to do my webinars with my favorite beverage, and I'll just leave it at beverage. You can make your beverage be whatever it is.
Yeah.
But to your point too, where you can ask people, where you're watching people walk through things, and then you can say, okay, well, I missed that part. Could you go back or explain that a little bit different? Actually, I went through one the other day because QuickBooks, which we use to run finances,
right?
Somebody did a couple of different updates, and I was like, I got to find somebody, right? And so they happened to be doing a webinar for this new thing they were pushing out, and be able to go in there and say, okay, well, this is my company. This is exactly how we have it set up. How's this going to affect us, or what could we do differently? And you have that in the moment. With both the presenter and everybody else in the forum, so you really have this nice group chat. So yeah, find yourself some good webinars and give yourself some time for sure. That's a good thing to do. The last one we said then is like online certifications. There's the Google Education Cert. There's the Microsoft Education Cert. At Eduro Learning, we have, we have the one-to-one teacher certification. We have the coach certification. We've got all these. We've got the COTEL program, certification of educational technology and information literacy. What do you like about doing a certification program? Like in your mind, why, you're both, a Google and a Microsoft. Yeah. Why do you like doing that? What does it give you? Other than the cool badge, you get to put that cool badge.
I was just going to actually say, because I get the cool badge.
Yeah.
But I mean, think about your students, whether current classroom or past classrooms, there's going to be a carrot for those kids. It's the final product. It's the final concert in my case, or the thing that's going to be online. I think to know if I'm going to spend some time learning this stuff, I want to be sort of recognized, and that's important. But at the same time, as new things roll out, I think Microsoft and Google in particular want to get more people using this stuff. So instead of, I think it's the next step of a webinar that says, did you really get this? So we're going to test you. And I remember I was nervous for that level 1 thing with Google, and you got to have your camera on and do all this stuff. But I'm really glad I did it, because I thought I knew. I mean, I was pretty smug about my Google,
knowledge.
How to use knowledge. Yeah, everybody's coming to me, and I'm like, ugh, not so much. And then it helped me just become better. Yeah. And I also know, particularly in the Microsoft arena, a lot of schools are using Schoology, and when you find the link into the Microsoft thing, even just the little videos, even if you don't take the test, and it's typically multiple choice, and you're timed, and you can take it so many times in a day, so it's pretty good that way. And you get frustrated when you keep missing that one question you thought you knew. Yeah. But it really does give you, it says, yeah, I know my stuff. And it usually sends you off on good rabbit trails for the things that you really want to drill down to use with your students, or just on your own learning,
Yeah. And I think what I like about them is I know that, a good certification program is vetted. You can spend all your time trying to, you can learn Google by going to YouTube and just doing the search. Or I'll just use YouTube as an example. We have a Google Suites for Educators account. You take our online course, and our online course, we have vetted the videos, we have created the videos, we walk you through. And so it's not just some random person, like there's a quality behind it that I think you just expect. And this is the only one out of everything we've talked about really that is like usually pay for these in some way. I think Google, you have to pay for the test. Microsoft, I'm not sure how they do it.
I think if you get into deeper levels, there's more paid, but I think it does worth it because it's resume stuff,
Right.
And like you said, it's a perfect opportunity for PD, because a lot of these places like Eduro and even in Seattle Public Schools, we just had a meeting yesterday, and they're starting to put courses when it, you mentioned traffic in Seattle, we're finally realizing, why do I need to drive across town for some PD when we can, we're sort of getting smart about that. And they're saying, hey, you can go on there and you can get some clock cars, which you'd think we'd be doing a lot of. It's just kind of now rolling out, which is really great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you pay for a lot of these online courses, and I'm just, I'll use Eduro as an example. I mean, when you pay for a course, what you're paying for is, one, you'll have an instructor. So now you're not just doing this alone. If you have those questions, you have somebody in your back pocket that you can say, I don't get this, I don't get that. Can we jump on a Skype call? You have somebody to email to support you through your learning. That's number one. Number two, you're also paying for, we had to pay somebody to create that course for us, right? Like, we are going to take your time, and I'll just use you as an example. We paid you to create for us, Microsoft, these courses on Microsoft Suite for education. Yeah. We want to value your time. And when you take one of our courses, know that, and I just use us as an example, but I would say any good online course, people's time is worth something, and we're going to create a great product, and it's going to have to cost a little thing, because people's time costs money, and you can pay for that in, if you go to YouTube, you're paying with your attention, because there's little ads that pop up at the bottom, and those people are still getting paid. Or you can, pay somebody and pay an instructor saying, thank you for putting this together for me, and be there to support me throughout the process. And I think that is just a great way to look at different certifications. And to your point, the badging, I know people all over the place that have gotten jobs or have been able to move up because they were a Google certified trainer. Right. I'm a Google certified trainer. I can get a job at a school with that badge. That badge means something. We also at Eduro, we run the COTEL program, the Certificate of Educational Technology. COTEL, Certificate of Educational Technology and Information Literacy. I've said that so many times, you don't think I'd have to remember. But, we started that for international educators overseas, and it means something within the educational world. Like, if you go to a job fair and you're trying to find a new job at a new international school, and you have the COTEL certificate, man, I can't tell you how many times I've actually had superintendents and principals email me and say, hey, I have somebody sitting in front of me. They are COTEL grad. What can you tell me about them? Yeah. Those certificates mean something. They're really powerful ways to kind of quote unquote level up your learning, I guess.
Well, and part of being a professional, lawyer, teacher, is staying on top of your craft. I need to know my discipline, and it's changing all the time. And if I'm not at least doing something, this is why we have professional development. And a lot of us know that when it's fed to us or given to us, it's often not as engaging because it's required. This happens to a lot of us who are specialists who, because we're in the building, have to go to a math training that has nothing to do with music. That doesn't mean we can't glean stuff, but when I can go to Eduro or I can go to Google, and I'm like, I'm going to use that stuff tomorrow, and it's going to go on my resume, and it lets people know that I'm not just doing dittos in the classroom or whatever. You're basically saying, I'm taking my job as a lifelong learner seriously. And then you don't get stuck. Yeah,
I love that idea.
How do oh man, I'm so bummed out being a teacher. Whoa, hold on. Have you tried this, looking into something new? I mean, I do wake up some days and at the end of the day go, oh my gosh, I'm so bummed out, I'm a teacher. But at the same time I go, listen, you have the opportunity more than anybody to go get more training because my school district wants it. My students, my parents demand it, and my students need it, right? So, I mean, that's the wonderful thing about being an educator. It's also the worst thing sometimes because there's always more to learn, but still you're just like, bring it. So,
and to your point, I think for me, that's part of being a professional. Like, I always sometimes in trainings, I'll say is like, if you went to a doctor who said, you know what, I graduated with my doctor's degree in 1984 and I haven't gone back and done anything, you would probably run out of the building. I would hope you would, right? We expect our professionals, or I'm a lawyer and, the last law book that I looked at was from 1987. So, but don't worry, I'm going to, or I'm a CPA and I haven't taken a class in 10 years on the tax laws. Like those people, you would turn and run away. And I think if we want to be treated like professionals, we have to stay up on our game. I mean, this thing is constantly changing, not just the tools, but the different approaches, different things that are coming around. When it comes to online courses, one of the things I would strongly advise people look for is make sure it's got something behind it. For example, at Eduro Learning, not all of our courses, but most of our courses, and they all will be because it takes some time, but they all have syllabus that have been approved by university. We're not just talking like a bunch of people throwing some crap together, excuse my language. We've actually gone through a process that is based in real learning theory and leads to something greater. Like you're going to get something out of this. And it's so true. You got to stay on top of your game as an educator. This stuff constantly is changing and that should excite you. Learning as an educator should excite you. I mean, the reason why I became a teacher is because I was like, I love learning, and what better place to do that than to just always be in a school.
That's true.
You're just surrounded around it, but so cool. So, well, thank you, sir, for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been great doing this, and hopefully we'll have you back on in the future. It's great. We're on the same time zone, and we can do this after school. I know we had to wait just a little bit for you to get school out. Our time wasn't quite right.
You kids, get out of here. No.
Yeah. So that will do it for this Eduro Learning live stream. Catch us next week when Kim Cafino talks about the top 5 strategies for your coaching toolkit. Until then, make sure you check us out on the video here on YouTube or Facebook. All of these are updated to our Facebook page. So you can go facebook.com/Eduro Learning. Follow us there. We become part of your PLN there. You can find the videos anywhere else that you can find. And also check out our podcast channel. This will probably become a podcast. We'll download this whole series that we're doing on becoming a lifelong learner. We'll be downloading this and releasing this as a series. Right now, we're probably into March or April by the time that comes out. But it's great. Thank you again, Ken. Appreciate you spending the night with me.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Until next time, we'll see you on the network.